When asked what was the biggest TV show in the world, for a while it was this. Broadcast in over 200 countries with a global audience of over 350 million and a domestic audience regularly above 7 million, for a time it filled shelves, stadiums and Ofcom's inbox. With over 50 years of history, I'm going to attempt to do this historic show justice. I mean, how hard can it be? The show that justified the licence fee for over a decade. They smashed records, bones and many caravans as they left fans in awe and hysterics, pushing the boundaries of what a pokey little motoring show could be. They are the defining proof that the world isn't flat, because if it was, these crazy bastards would have driven off it by now. Childhood-defining memories, death-defying spectacles, and ever-intensifying controversy. It's Top Gear. Just before I start, if you enjoyed the video, it would be a massive help if you could like, subscribe, and leave a comment. And if you really enjoyed the video, it would be a massive help if you could visit my Patreon, link in the description, and just chuck me a quid. I mean, I'm not going to make any money off this, as you can see. I've used quite a lot of copyrighted footage. So if you could chuck me a quid on Patreon, you get to see the videos as they're intended before any cuts or any freezes that I had to do for rights purposes. Anyway, on with the video. This story starts in the heartland of the British motoring industry, Birmingham. Sutton Coldfields native Derek Smith was sitting in his office in 1977 in Pebble Mills, the BBC's base in Birmingham. Derek was 20 years into his career with the BBC at this point. He was a very accomplished producer with a good string of factual programmes under his belt. And as Del sat in his office, he looked out of his window, which overlooked the car park, and he thought to himself, it'd be good to have a motoring show, wouldn't it? And the idea for Top Gear was born. So Derek eventually stopped staring out of his window, because you never know who's going to be out there dogging or doing whatnot, and he got to work. Top Gear would be a motoring show that pretty much just gave consumer advice and education on stuff relating to cars. You know, stuff like road safety and all kinds of bollocks like that. It was basically like Blue Peter for cars. The show would only air regionally on the regional BBC channel BBC Midlands. It would also only air once a month. The hosts would be presenter Tom Coyne and TV legend Angela Rippon.
Who was the first presenter of Top Gear? Because it was me. Everybody thinks it was Jeremy Clarkson. No, it was me.
Angela Rippon was the first female presenter to be given a permanent presenting role with the BBC on the national TV news. And in 1977, she was at the height of her career. She was on the 9 o'clock news at the time, as a presenter, not a criminal, and she'd just been on the Morecambe and Wise show. She would also host that year's Eurovision Song Contest. So yeah, she was massive. Now the show needed a theme song. So one day when Derek Smith went home, he asked one of his sons, Graham, you know, what are people listening to? You got any suggestions? What music should I use? And Graham said the Allman Brothers song, Jessica. And his old man Derek said, yeah, go on then, yeah, we'll use that and that will do. On the 22nd of April 1977 on BBC Midlands, that music would blare out as Top Gear would debut.
Hello there, and welcome to this, our first edition of Top Gear.
The first episode saw Angela Rippon drive up the M1 in a Ford Capri talking about the importance of checking your mirrors on the motorway.
I think an awful lot of people don't use their mirrors enough. They don't bother to look in them to see what's happening behind. They pull out without realising that someone's coming up very fast on the outside lane. I would like to see drivers using their mirrors far more.
She also interviewed some geezers at a service station.
Egg and chips and a cup of coffee, £1. That's not exactly cheap, is it?
No. Unfortunately, running a 24-hour service 365 days a year costs a great deal of money.
In this first series, they also talked about the technology that police use to catch motorists that are speeding. They talked about rally cars. They talked about fuel efficiency. Tom Coyne interviewed William Rogers, the Minister of Transport, who talked about drink driving and wearing seatbelts. And somehow, the show was successful. Fuck me, how boring must the Midlands have been in the 1970s? My goodness. This show was originally commissioned for 9 episodes on BBC Midlands, but soon BBC wanted to take it national. 10 weekly episodes were commissioned for BBC Two. On the 13th of July 1978, Top Gear debuted on BBC Two. Barry Gill replaced Tom Coyne as a presenter, with Angela Rippon staying on in her role. And from what it looked like, the show seemed boring as fuck. I mean, who is watching this? How bad was the competition? How bad were the options? Just look out your window, that's probably more entertaining. I suppose this show was like the 70s version of how-to videos. And people love their cars. You know, if a show's going to tell you how to avoid rust, or corrosion, or blood stains, you know, in your motor, then yeah, you might as well stick it on. As well as just car maintenance bollocks, they also included films on events like the British International Motor Show, or the 24-hour race at Le Mans. Yeah, check out that French pronunciation, ladies. Bit of the suave Sanch for you there. Yeah. So the second series came in 1979, and yeah, not really much to talk about. We had some new presenters like Gil Pryor and Mike Doran, and they presented some segments on how to buy a used car. Judith Jackson also joined the show, and so did Niall Edmonds.
You have to open that door to reach in and open the back.
Yes, one of the most popular presenters on UK TV in the prime of his career would now be a presenter on Top Gear. And in case you didn't know who Noel Edmonds was, he is a TV veteran who's done too many shows to count, like Swap Shop, Deal or No Deal. He's got a lovely beard. He invented Mr. Blobby. He half invented a Mr. Blobby theme park. He used to have some strange house parties, and he has some very strange beliefs. That's a whole video in its own right. That's a rabbit hole that you don't want to go down. Anyway, Top Gear proved to be so successful that the BBC commissioned 2 series a year, and in 1980 they had their first special, Top Gear Turns Back the Clock. Apparently this existed. I can't find any description of it or much evidence that it actually happened, so I'm just trusting that it happened. In 1980, Noel Edmonds replaced Angela Rippon as a main presenter on the show, and he got Top Gear in its first controversy, as during a road test he criticised the Fiat Strada, calling it ugly and not very good. It was a simpler time.
I just remain staggered that anybody in the late 70s, early 80s can come up with a design like this, because I think it is positively ugly. To me, it looks like a young child wearing very unfortunate national health specs.
He and Top Gear would be in a lot more controversy over the years. Anyway, 1981 saw a new face of the show, William Woolard, who would replace Noel Edmonds.
Good evening and welcome to another Top Gear, tonight coming to you live from the control centre of this year's Lombard RAC rally here in Chester.
William Woolard was a former Oxford graduate and RAF fighter pilot who then went on to become a highly respected producer and award-winning presenter. He spent 11 years as the face of the science programme Tomorrow's World. There he developed a great ability to make technical information palatable for a TV audience. He was also a Buddhist. Combining that with his military background and TV experience, it gave him a calm, authoritative and knowledgeable presence that made him perfect for the show. He was also easy on the eye. Oh, if I was.
I remember seeing the programme with Noel, and it seemed to have a kind of very loose journalistic feel to it. It was all very much vroom vroom school of motoring journalism. You know, I mean, I can drive this red one faster than you, and about the shape and colour of cars so much. I found that is not the sort of journalism I'm interested in, so it wasn't one of my favourite programmes, I must admit.
As the years went on, we got some more new presenters, like Marianne Foster, Frank Page, Sue Baker, not the tennis geezer, Chris Goffey and Dave Minton. In 1983, Dennis Adams replaced Derek Smith as executive producer. That year, Top Gear did a special all about seatbelt legislation. I'm sure that was fascinating. The next year, they did a special about rust. That was called Rust. Fair enough, straight to the point. Again, sure that was riveting TV. The years went on, some presenters left, some presenters stayed, some new presenters came in. Up to this point, Top Gear was a decent show. It was aimed specifically at car fans, and info on cars is exactly what it gave you, really. So, you know, fair enough, niche show for a niche audience.
The Bentley Turbo R has the same 6.75 litre engine, turbocharged to produce approximately 330 bhp.
The most exciting episodes they would really do would be when they covered rallying or the car industry in another country, like Poland. But most of the topics were just consumer advice and think pieces. For example, they did a segment on if car advertisements encouraged people to drive dangerously. It was the kind of stuff that people who regularly went to Maplin's might enjoy. So on the whole, the show wasn't really pulling up any trees, but, you know, it was informative and responsible. However, that was about to change. In step, Jeremy Clarkson. Jeremy Clarkson was born in Yorkshire in 1960. His family weren't too well off until his mother had the idea of making a teddy bear from the children's book character Paddington Bear. She was granted the license to sell them and they were away. His father worked as a salesman for the Paddington Bears, and they got enough money to send Jeremy Clarkson to a public boarding school, Repton. And moving away from home would be the perfect opportunity for Clarkson to indulge his rebellious side. Repton would also be where he met his partner in crime, his long-term friend, Andy Willman. In Repton, Andy stayed in the same house as Clarkson, and shared his same sense of humour and sensibility for making trouble.
We did become mates there, because you either stand out through sport, which we were both utterly shit at, or you stand out by getting into trouble.
Yeah.
So we were like, well, we'll take that route then.
Of course.
As he said in an interview back then, there were two ways to get a girl: either play sports or get into trouble, and they were not athletes.
If you fast forward with it, you know, Top Gear was always often known for controversy, for getting into trouble, winding people up. Now, most of the time we got that right, and what I mean by that is we would get into trouble, we would cause outrage in the Daily Mail or the Daily Mirror or whatever, but nobody really cared. And the only reason that happened is we most of the time we could do it with a bit of charm, our getting into trouble. And I do believe that came from when we were at Repton.
As a result of his troublemaking, Clarkson got kicked out 10 weeks before he was going to sit his A-levels. A family acquaintance saw him walking around one day and said, "You should be a journalist." And Clarkson went, "Alright, go on then." And he started on the Rotherham Advertiser.
And I was walking down the village street at home, and this chap came along, and he was the general manager of the local newspaper. So he said, "What are you doing here? I thought you were at school." And I said, "Well, you know, I've been thrown out." And he said, "Oh, you've been thrown out of school. You've got to be a journalist."
There, his tendencies to get in trouble continued to reign strong. In seek of a more exciting life, he moved to London, where in a pub one day, he came up with the idea of doing car reviews and selling them to various publications.
You'd write one piece about a car and then syndicate it to lots of local newspapers. So I figured that's fantastic. It's 20 minutes work a week, tops.
Doing this, he found out that he would not only get sent a car with a full tank of petrol, but he'd also get flown out to different places and have his travel covered. And he didn't even have to have Rick Shakes do obscene things to him. He thought, yeah, this is alright. In 1986, on one of these trips, he found himself in the New Forest at a Citroën launch. And there at a party, he bumped into John Bentley. John was a Top Gear researcher at the time, and was even directing features and having his say on the direction of the programme. He thought the show needed to be more humorous, and as he put it, "I felt we needed a more opinionated, controversial and passionate view." Who on earth could possibly fit that description? Well, he was thoroughly impressed with Jeremy. When John got more established on the show, he would ring up car magazines to see if their editors could be good presenters, but he had no luck. Something else John would do in search of new presenting talent was to go to car launches. And at this Citroën launch, he met Jeremy Clarkson. And on this occasion, Clarkson was pissed as fuck. And in his state of smashness, he told John how he could do a better job than they were doing on Top Gear. I mean, they did have a longer conversation than that, but John loved how passionate, opinionated, funny and unserious that Clarkson was, and thought this is exactly what Top Gear needed. Well, besides being smashed, they really didn't need that in the end. Anyway, in 1987, John Bentley joined Ken Pollock in his role as producer. So they'd both share the role, they were co-producers. John was able to get Jeremy Clarkson a screen test. The BBC booked a full day of screen testing in Shugborough, I presume that's a real place, for potential presenters. Presenters were asked to talk about a car of their choice for 2 minutes and then talk about a surprise car, which would be the 2CV. For Clarkson's choice, he picked a Range Rover, and he was streets ahead of everyone else and passed the screen test. However, at the time, the show was full for on-screen talent. But then in 1988, Sue Baker left the show and Clarkson was in. On the 27th of October, he made his on-air debut. Well, I mean, his TV debut. He was actually on a BBC radio drama when he was 12. Interesting. At the time, the show was suffering in the ratings, and there were calls for the BBC to cancel the show.
The other thing I think was trying to persuade the BBC, because they were quite sceptical in the early days. There had been car programmes on before, but I think they tended to seem to think that people weren't really that interested in cars.
So they needed a new, brash, confident, bold, entertaining voice to reinvigorate the show. And Clarkson was not that. No, not at first he wasn't.
Now this one, for instance, is seriously lacking in the door department. It began in life as a pretty standard Bentley Turbo R with 4 doors and has been converted into what's called a 2-door coupe, i.e. it has 1 long door on either side. And that means there's pretty substantial alterations between here and here.
During his first appearance, Clarkson seemed to be doing an impression of what he thought a TV presenter should be. He had a shirt and tie, he was affecting some kind of posh accent. It wasn't exactly a Conor Bradley style debut.
I should have stood like this, talking in a very monotone, frightened way about this Bentley, with an idiotic tie on and a stupid blazer because I was trying to look smart.
However, it wouldn't be too long before he found his voice.
I would certainly rather walk than ever drive one of these again. I've got my foot welded to the floor, absolutely welded to the floor. Come on, come on!
He started developing his signature cadence and turns of phrase.
X90, they say, says it all, with an exclamation mark. Indeed it does.
Daryl Hannah could be sunbathing topless on the boot, and I wouldn't have a clue.
His shite dress sense, his mind-bending metaphors and similes, and his crude non-PC jokes.
And on top of all that, it's the first Ford that I can remember which looks good enough to snap knicker elastic at 50 paces.
Well, this was absolute catmint to the critics. Did it mean that he was misogynistic? Who's knicker elastic? Would it snap? Was this demeaning to women? Anyway, it was fabulous because everybody was outraged except for the people who loved it. Jeremy Clarkson, absolutely at the forefront of the news. Job done.
I'm wearing an especially scandalous thong today. I suspect whatever car that was, it could probably remove this from me.
He'd stray away from the typical direct-to-camera intros and indulge his cinematic tendencies. And perhaps what more than anything drew audiences in was his criticism of cars, which would be something he would make an art form.
Or maybe you've noted none of these things because you're sitting there thinking, that is the most stupid-looking car I have ever seen in my entire life. Want to meet the designer?
What inspired you to design the X90?
He was much braver and bolder about saying, compared to most other broadcasters I've worked with, if he thought something was rubbish, he just said it was utterly rubbish.
Some of the highlights included his takedown of the Vauxhall Vectra. He disliked the car so much, he spent the segment finding ways to talk about anything else but the car.
Yeah? Yes. No, it is. It's a good idea. I'll go for a drive. We'll play some music. We always do that.
I think the Vauxhall Vectra review was actually a watershed in British TV. It was suddenly saying, look, we're bigger than you. If you don't want to send us any more cars, don't send them. We're going to tell the truth about this car, and it's shite.
Clarkson cemented himself as the star of the show and was becoming a mainstream celebrity, and his presenting style was so identifiable that he even spoofed himself for Red Nose Day.
This is not a sexy car. It's square, it's plain, but it does the job it's intended for. It's as safe as a nun's underpants, as solid as Tina Turner's thighs, and it meets the needs exactly of its target audience.
Oh, for God's sake, just push the thing.
In a minute. This is a car which says, hey, I look cool, even in a nappy.
Clarkson, however, was not alone in his car criticism, as the cartoonishly posh, witty car trader and journalist Quinton Wilson also got in on the act after he joined the show in 1991.
The dashboard looks like an early Doctor Who prop, and the whole thing sways like a drunk on braking and acceleration. Buy a Micra or a Punto, but not this, because you'll find it as enjoyable as muesli without milk.
Clarkson and Quinton, who met years before at a car launch, got along right from the start, and when working on Top Gear, they'd stay up late at night working on jokes, and the then producer Dennis Adams would give them free rein to say it on the air. The honesty and humour of Clarkson and Quinton turns motoring journalism on its head and turns car reviews from just consumer advice to entertainment.
We soon knew, Jeremy and I, that the way to the viewers' hearts was to take no prisoners, was to shoot from the hip. And at that stage, there were an awful lot of very lacklustre, very mediocre cars. And this is our point, that the old Metro has all the finesse and the subtlety of a thumb in the eye.
It's a hateful, hateful car. Warp drive depreciation, balsa wood build quality, and all the charisma of a misfiring moped.
Another presenter who joined the team was Andy Willman.
5 women who are going to look at 5 types of cars and help men answer once and for all that beef on the bone question. Can you pull in it?
After failing the exam to get into MI6, Jeremy Clarkson encouraged him to become a motoring journalist. He followed his advice, and in 1994 he would join Jeremy as a presenter on Top Gear.
The original reason they wanted me on Top Gear was to do kind of consumery investigative stuff, but Watchdog were really doing that better. So they wanted somebody to be naked more often. My first piece I was in a sauna, then I went to do limousines, and I was naked in the back of the jacuzzi. And then the full big frontal, which was the nude classic car show, which was so funny because everybody, even the film crew, had to be naked for that.
In addition to this, lending the show credibility with the world of motorsport fans, you had the ex-Formula 1 driver, Tiff Needell, with his signature power slides. And the ever affable and charming ex-rally co-driver, Tony Mason.
These imp enthusiasts have finally converted me, so much so that I've decided to go home in one.
Another presenter who was keen to be on the show was the, if you can imagine it at the time, young man James May, who did a screen test for the show in the early 1990s. However, he was seen as too similar to Jeremy, and therefore he didn't pass the screen test, so never mind. So when you take Clarkson and Quinton's comedy, Tiff Needell's exhilarating driving, the charm of Tony Mason, and the possibility of seeing Andy Willman's knob, Top Gear's ratings would shoot up. The older class of presenters like William Willard would eventually leave the show in 1991, stepping aside as the show moved in a new direction. While it still be rooted in consumer advice and predominantly feature cars aimed at the everyman, it would start to feature more expensive and exotic cars. Over the 1990s, it seemed to start to go from being a show primarily aimed at the car consumer to one aimed at the car lover. Behind the camera, John Bentley moved into a more senior role of editor, replacing Tom Ross in 1991, and the show would take on a bit more of a cinematic filming style. Admittedly, however, it was nothing compared to what we'd see in later years. The show would also start to vary the type of segments that they'd actually do, involving the presenters getting into the thick of the action more.
And I think that's what made Top Gear, the fact that it went from a reporter standing next to something that was happening and reporting on it, to people actually involved in the thick of the action.
Top Gear went from having views in the hundreds of thousands to reaching up to 6 million views a week. The show was so popular that in 1993 the Top Gear magazine started. Top Gear had taken off. As the 1990s went on, the whole show in general just got better. Back in 1986, the BBC had replaced its production staff, and in time this change seemed to be bearing fruit. Even the specials got better, with the Ferrari one being fucking beautiful.
And that makes every single one of them a dream car.
They even had Chris Rea. What more do you want? The show's popularity also spawned several spin-off shows, with other BBC programmes that adopted the name Top Gear popping up in increasing frequency. The presenters would also be granted their own solo BBC shows. These would include Jeremy Clarkson's Motor World, a show which Jeremy Clarkson and Andy Willman would also be associate producers of. This 2-series long show running from 1995 to 1996 allowed Clarkson and Willman to start to put their vision of what a motoring show could be on the screen. This show spent every episode exploring the motoring culture of a different country. They'd even expand the topic of conversation to go beyond cars and cover other vehicles like motorbikes and speedboats. Clarkson would ditch the consumer advice and instead explore the weird and wonderful aspects of motoring culture and the culture of the given country he was in as well, all the while seeming to cosplay as a fat Kenny Omega. 1995 also saw Clarkson start his yearly tradition of releasing an annual home video where he would take his vision of what a car program could be even further, with the videos being sold on the tagline, "Everything he can't do on TV."
Jeremy Clarkson is going to take you on the bumpy ride that is motorsport mayhem. Available from WH Smith, Woolworths and all good video stockists.
These videos would go on to have a massive impact on another legendary TV presenter.
Wallop! What a video!
These Clarkson solo projects also seem to have an influence on Top Gear, as soon we'd have more fun, unusual and adventurous segments creeping into the show, and one of the best segments from early Top Gear, Siamese banger racing.
Meanwhile, I was getting a bit anxious. Where was my man Tiff?
Andy, good news, it's me!
Where's Tiff?
He's busy! This was his car, but it's mine now!
Oh, wait,
no, you'll come.
In this segment you can actually see the comedic chemistry between Clarkson and Willman on screen.
I have no steering at all now. So there we go. Andy, over to you, mate.
Right then.
It's a great window into what's to come in Top Gear's future.
If you just buff this out, it'll work. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. The engine works. It's ready to go. If we can just get the AA and move this one, we're fine. Does yours work? Mine works. Well, we've won then, because ours worked. Look.
Ditching the 1980s model of having the show fronted by one particular presenter, they would instead make the focus of the show the ensemble cast of on-screen talent, which really allowed everyone to show off their unique voices. Vicky Butler Henderson and Steve Perry would also make great additions to the cast.
This car is for the complete extrovert. Shy, retiring types need not apply.
Top Gear seemed to dip one toe into the lads culture of the 1990s, with Clarkson being coined the High Priestess of Laddishness.
Notice a trend there? Men hated it, women loved it. So without wishing to be crude, it seems to be, a bit of a bird puller.
This moniker naturally came with criticism.
It's a car for men who love women. It's got balls.
You're only interested in cars and you're a sexist pig.
It's even got power steering so the little lady can handle it.
Clarkson also caught a lot of heat from car companies who'd sent him cars to road test. Clarkson's scathing criticism of a car seemed to lead to it having poor sales numbers. This was deemed the Clarkson effect, which apparently has actually been debunked as a load of bollocks. While I wouldn't say Top Gear was a one-man show, Clarkson was definitely its biggest star. However, what do you do when a star outshines its sky? That sounded a lot better in my head. The BBC would soon have to face that dilemma, as Clarkson grew tired of the restraints placed on him by the show, and felt that he took the programme as far as he could. Also, according to an article he wrote at the time, he seemed to have run out of passion for his role on Top Gear. So on the 22nd of January 1999, he announced he would leave the show. In the next few years, Jeremy Clarkson would continue to write columns, release home videos, make a range of documentaries, books. He would release his own chat show, and he presented the first series of Robot Wars. He also came back to feature in Top Gear's 21st anniversary documentary. Strange to pick out a 21st year to celebrate, but whatever. Clarkson's departure threw the show into disarray, as the next series of Top Gear was set to air in less than 2 months, and it had previously been expected by everyone to feature Jeremy Clarkson. As a special precaution, the director at the time decided to film 2 segments just in case they needed filler, which probably wouldn't have been enough to replace a whole presenter, but never mind. Only one of these segments would actually make the air. The other one, which didn't get used, was about the paint colours that cars used. I don't think you missed much there. To fill the voids left by Clarkson, they also got in new presenters: Brendan Coogan, who's Steve Coogan's brother, Julia Bradbury, and oh, here he comes, watch out now, he's a spam eater, it's James May.
Appliances. Pleasingly convenient, usefully reliable, relentlessly unexciting. Appliances such as the kettle, the hairdryer, the toaster, and the Toyota Starlet.
James May studied music at Lancaster University, which is of course inferior to Lancashire University, but still. He would then work as a records officer, whatever that is, in a hospital in Chelsea before starting a journalism career. He got a job writing for Autocar magazine, and then got fired from a job writing for Autocar magazine, as he played an elaborate prank in one of the magazine's annuals. Oh, sounds painful, don't be messing around in someone's annuals. He was set the task of compiling a selection of car reviews, so he started each review with a giant letter in red, which when you put them together spelt out,
"So you think this is really good, but you should try making it up, it's a real pain in the arse," which I thought was hilarious, but the management didn't.
Which isn't really that bad. I don't think it's really sacking worthy, to be honest. Didn't even use the C word. Anyway, James May continued to write for various other publications, such as Top Gear magazine and Car magazine. Not a very imaginative title for a car magazine, that. Anyway, in 1998, he would get a TV presenting job on the Channel 4 show Driven. And then in 1999, he'd make the move to Top Gear. On the 18th of March, the 41st series of Top Gear would air. And it was alright. James May was pretty much the same James May that he is now.
Driver airbags, passenger airbags, head airbags, side airbags. Soon there'll be an airbag for your luggage. Of course, no amount of airbaggery is going to stop you having an accident in the first place, but if you must have one, your car's probably the best place for it.
It was an okay series, but nothing special, and audiences did significantly drop off, as the previous series' average viewership was 3.93 million viewers, often rising above 4 million viewers for episodes. This series' average viewership was 3.24 million, several times dipping below 3 million. For the next series, all 3 of the new presenters were sent packing, very much taking the Chelsea approach. James May and Julia Bradbury's role was condensed into a single position, as it was filled by Kate Humble, who was selected for her lack of knowledge on cars. Fuck me, I wish I knew those were the job specs. I would have applied. I don't even drive, I'd have been a shoo-in. As for Brendan Coogan, he was sacked 6 episodes into Series 41 after he was convicted of drink driving. Steve Berry would also leave the series. Series 42 would see viewing figures drop to 3.15 million. They would drop again for the next series, Series 43, this time to 2.98 million viewers. This was enough for Quentin Wilson and Kate Humble to go, yeah, let's leave the show now. Then, after a segment was proposed about comparing petrol station sandwiches, another key contributor to the show, Richard Porter, said, yeah, I'm off. So the BBC had the task of replacing 2 presenters, so they again went down to Driven to poach some more talent. Very much the feeder club of motoring programmes. Well, actually, James May was fired from Driven before he went to Top Gear. This time they got Jason Barlow, who would fill Quentin's position of talking about used cars. However, they also needed someone to talk about new cars, and they had the choice between some geezer called Adrian Simpson with no TV presenting experience, and the other option was my second favourite hamster, Richard Hammond. Born Richard Marl Hammond, the Warwickshire native had spent some time working at various local radio stations, one of which was Radio Lancashire, where one of his regular guests was Zog Ziglar, who would review a car of the week while being interviewed by Richard Hammond. And it was old Zog, which probably isn't his real name, it was old Zog that suggested Hammond get into TV presenting, and specifically presenting motoring shows. He also gave him the nickname of Hamster. Richard got a job on the channel Men and Motors, where he presented several daytime lifestyle shows and motoring shows, such as Motor Week. He was a lovable, handsome, witty presenter. Well, he still is, actually. Yeah, seems like a nice geezer. He was a lovable, handsome, witty presenter who was just radiating charisma, and that got him noticed by decision makers at Top Gear. And the powers that be at the show said, nah, give me the other geezer with no TV presenting experience. Adrian Simpson was given the job as his lack of experience in TV presenting could make him more mouldable into being the kind of presenter the producers wanted him to be. It was also probably because Richard was too short. Fucking BBC, fucking height fascists. Auntie Baby, fucking size queen you. Series 44 of Top Gear attracted an average rating of 2.43 million. However, the next season, season 45, did see viewers increase as they got 2.73 million, with viewing figures even rising above 3 million for certain episodes. One of the episodes attracted 3.4 million viewers. This rise in viewership might be due to the fact the series saw the show focus more on stunts, fast cars and exciting segments. However, all of this wasn't enough to save the show. The series was the longest Top Gear series at 37 episodes long, which when you include hiatuses meant it ran all year long. And maybe it was the stretching out of the show's content across a large number of episodes that resulted in the show becoming watered down. Maybe it was the lack of star power after Jeremy Clarkson left. Whatever the reason was, the end result was that on the 6th of August 2001, Top Gear's time was up, as the BBC announced the show was on a planned hiatus, which is corporate speak for it's been binned off. On the 16th of November, former Top Gear director Richard Pearson announced a new show, Fifth Gear. And this would be on the channel that you turn to when there's nowhere else to go, Channel 5. At the time, Channel 5 was running for 5 years, and as the upstart terrestrial TV channel, they tried to make a name for themselves by trying to steal away programmes from other broadcasters. They unsuccessfully attempted to take away Neighbours from the BBC, The Bill from ITV. However, they did succeed in taking Home and Away from under the noses of ITV. Channel 5 attempted to do the same with Top Gear, however the BBC didn't want to sell the name, so Channel 5 went with the title Fifth Gear, which is the gear below Top Gear. Probably not a good idea if you want to compete with a show to choose a similar title, but just by definition inferior. Probably not good marketing that. Channel 5 decided to steal away Top Gear presenters Tiff Needell, Vicky Butler-Henderson and Adrian Simpson. Apparently the BBC already told those presenters they weren't going to be part of their future plans, but forget about that, that makes this story a bit less interesting. Channel 5 also hired Quinton Wilson to be part of Fifth Gear. They aimed to properly take on Top Gear, which, probably wouldn't be too hard to do as Top Gear wasn't on the air at the time, but regardless, they released a press statement firing shots at Top Gear. They said viewers will be left in no doubt as to which of the shows is the top of the range Ferrari and which is the clapped out banger. Fifth Gear is going to be the Formula 1 of motoring magazine shows. The BBC will be left on the hard shoulder, waiting for the AA man to drive. Yeah, Channel 5, intend those puns. Big words. This was going to be like WWF vs WCW. This was going to be like Monday Night War shit. The BBC continued to air the episodes of Top Gear that they'd already filmed, concluding in a final special airing with just Jason Barlow on the 4th of February 2002. However, that wouldn't be the end for Top Gear. It might have been those digs by Channel 5, or maybe it was indeed the BBC's plan all along. But after Channel 5 issued that press release, the BBC issued a response, where they said the BBC remains committed to the programme, which still pulls in big audiences for the channel. Top Gear is currently on air on BBC Two, and a new series will go out next year. And as luck would have it, they weren't the only ones thinking of Top Gear's future. As after the show was cancelled, the two ex-Top Gear presenters, Jeremy Clarkson and Andy Willman, met in a pub and discussed a new Top Gear.
There's a new sun rising up angry in the sky, and there's a new voice crying, we're not afraid to die. Let the old world make believe it's blind and deaf and dumb, but nothing can change the shape of things to come.